Hey guys, it's Matt here. And Battlefield Hardline did not deserve this.
You done f***ed it up!
Sure, we all have a weak spot for the all-out warfare in Battlefield 4, or the nostalgic clusterfucks in Bad Company 2. Watch those videos as well, please. But goddammit, this game should be remembered as more than just the black sheep of the franchise. And while Battlefield 2042 tripped over its own ego and hit the ground so hard it shook some of that negativity off of this game, I decided to revisit this kind of underwhelming yet still incredibly unique and entertaining title while I make my way through every single Battlefield game I've played in this sort of review on Battlefield Hardline.
Got that one! Give me some fucking help!
It was a calm yet exciting day in 2014 when we first laid eyes on the Battlefield title that would follow up the at that point still heavily divisive Battlefield 4. Rumors had been spreading about a potential switch in setting for the franchise. Would we go back to the Second World War? Would we see a futuristic setting like in 2142? Would there be a completely new setting for the franchise? Turns out it was the latter, and the entire Battlefield community let out a collective when that first trailer dropped. Battlefield Hardline, not only changing from a military setting to a cops vs robbers setting, but also handing the development of the game over from mainstay developer DICE to relative newcomer Visceral Games. Remember Visceral Games? The development studio made up of honest, hardworking people that made some of your favorite games like Dead Space and Dante's Inferno, that was brutally murdered by EA because EA doesn't like it when people are having fun? Yeah, those guys. So even though the idea looked like a fresh new take on the Battlefield formula and it was being made by a developer with a pretty good track record so far, fans weren't necessarily blown away by the idea nor the footage that was shown. The new cops vs robbers setting actually even looked like it would heavily limit the game and the sandbox approach to gameplay of the previous titles. But even so, the game released in early 2015 with a complete single player campaign as well as a multiplayer. Yet again, no spec ops or any other bonus game mode, but do you really care about that? It's not like the possibility of a zombies mode in Battlefield ever looked like it would happen. And no, I'm not going to talk about the dinosaur survival mode in Battlefield 3. It didn't happen, it never will happen, get over it. As always, let's start with the campaign. We follow the adventures of police officer slash detective slash convicted criminal slash guy with the personality of stale bread, Nick Mendoza, who we see right here in handcuffs. We don't really know why yet, but spoiler alert, everyone in this game sucks at being a police officer. This whole story is told as if you're watching a television cop drama. A unique way to tell a story, but it doesn't make the story any more interesting because, let's be honest, we didn't really expect it to be. It's a Battlefield campaign. But at least it fits with the setting and it does make this campaign a bit more immersive and unique. The game has its own intro, theme song, the characters are introduced with the names of the actors that play them, and when you complete a mission it tells you the next episode is starting soon. You get the idea. We flash back to 2012 and we see Nick together with his partner Carl Stoddard making a drug bust. But, and I would like to present from this moment on the one and only cliché counter, the drug bust goes south.
It's not a gun! Get down, cover! Jesus Christ! That got out of hand fast.
A pursuit ensues and before you know it the first few thousands of dollars in damage have already been made. But to be honest, this city already looked like shit anyway, and it's not like we had any expectations of this story being anything other than the first 15 minutes of Team America. Back at the bureau, police captain Julian Dawes decides that Nick needs a new partner, so he gets partnered up with Kai Min Dao. Obviously they don't get along well because we gotta keep that cliché counter going. Together they follow a lead on former LA Noire vice detective, present day cocaine broker and future mythological dwarf Adam J. Harrington, known in this game as Tyson Ledford. At this point it actually really made me feel like I was watching a television series. Boring dialogue for 5 minutes straight while I can't do anything, flashing game instructions across the screen like commercial breaks in fully monetized YouTube videos, crappy lighting like I was rewatching Game of Thrones' The Long Night. Anyway, one long street of incredibly crappy police work further and they kidnap some guy who they force to wear a wire, infiltrate a drug hideout where he speaks to a faceless goon, and before you know it, everything goes south again. They make contact with Latchford, but as soon as they arrive at his location, well, you guessed it.
Fuck off!
guy loses a lot of blood, but plot armor is one hell of a drug, so a few weeks later she's already back in action. They're tasked with apprehending this guy called Leo. Now I'm sure that Leo probably isn't the most stand-up citizen in the world, but oh my god, this guy gets tossed around like Brad Pitt in Meet Joe Black. He gets insulted, he gets shot at, he gets his face remodeled because he said a no-no. He f***ing dies by alligator even though all the alligators in this game are actually crocodiles. Give the man a break. Also that one moment where Kai decides that good cops don't always play by the rules. Kai and Nick find themselves in the Everglades, which is just a very nice way of saying shitty swamp area. Long story short, drugs, alligators that are actually crocodiles, airboats, and they find the guy that they were looking for. But he escapes. But they find him again. But then Stoddard comes in and kills him. Turns out Stoddard is actually in on the whole drug operation, and oh no, Kai as well. Nick doesn't accept their attempt to make him join them because that's not what good cops do, but apparently mass murder is okay as long as you flash your police badge every now and then. Also, maybe he should have taken the deal because that would have made working together with those people a lot less awkward in the next mission. Dawes in the meantime is all like, haha, we got you, this was all a test, we're not corrupt at all, except of course they totally are, so Dawes destroys any incriminating evidence and sends Nick to prison. And we're back in 2015. Nick is kind of bummed out after spending the last 3 years in prison, even though he's innocent. But unfortunately there's nothing we can do about it because the American legal system is flawless and Nick spends the rest of his life in prison. The end. No, actually wait, the prison bus goes boom and Nick escapes and meets up with Tyler and the person who orchestrated the whole escape, Kai. Nick is all like, hey, thanks for getting me out of here I guess, but you kind of framed me, ruined my life and made me miss my mother's funeral.
My mother died when I was in prison, Kai.
But apparently Nick is incredibly forgiving because by god that plot needs to keep moving forward. Next step, go find that guy from 8 Mile in the trunk of a car, attack the Korean mafia, destroy a perfectly nice and legal car dealership, and it's going to go south again, is it? They find another lead in the form of drug kingpin Neil Rourke, aka the guy from Aliens. After infiltrating his house, a bunch of goons obviously show up earlier than expected, so you kill all of them because you're doing this for the greater good or something. Rourke surprises you with the world's most useless television, why would you hang it above your bed? And I probably don't have to tell you where this is going next.
Oh shit.
$3 million worth of damage and the whole team is like, you know what, we can do much better than that, but we need a big f***ing safe cracking device to do so. Where can we get that? Well, luckily our friend Boomer here has a weird ex-girlfriend in the middle of the desert whose father has one of these things. Off to the desert we go, except of course it's another double cross because we landed right in the middle of a white supremacist encampment. Why would these people suddenly want to help a Cuban and a colored man that are both convicted criminals? And things go the most southest they have gone so far. Boomer and Nick are taken prisoner, but escape incredibly easy and kill everyone in the compound. But to be honest, these guys had it coming. They make their way to an airfield where all the reused Battlefield 4 assets go to die, and they make sure to kill the creepy compound guy with a tank because it's Battlefield and will tease you by showing you that the ability to use tanks is most certainly present in the game, you're just not going to get it in the multiplayer. With our newly acquired safe cracking device as well as a long list of illegal proceedings and murders, we finally go for the big one. A heist on the top floor of an evil looking skyscraper owned by a corrupt police officer who made his own private army with drug money. Now come on, that's worth at least 5 cliches. They flood the elevator shaft, which is actually pretty smart and really cool. I wish I had thought of that. And in true Hollywood fashion, they clear this highly guarded building like it was nothing. Except plot twist, booby trap.
Get back!
Dawes knew about the heist all along, and now the gang is in serious trouble. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the most southest southgoing of all the southgoings in this game.
Shit!
Hurry!
There they are! You! Stop right there!
Go! Go!
Holy shit!
And yes, of course, everyone survives this fall, and Dawes straight up tells Nick his location. Finally, Nick and the gang are going to end all of this, right here on Dawes' own private island, in his own private villa, with his own private military that doesn't really seem to be very good at their job. They all just lie down as soon as you ask them nicely. Dawes invites you up to his office, where he starts his typical bad guy speech in order to convince Nick to join him. But Nick decides that he's kind of done with talking.
How's your mother, Nick?
Also, that's really gross, and just for that, Nick finds a note on Dawes' desk explaining how he knew this was going to happen. Nick finds a bust which he can use to open a secret door. The door leads to a vault, behind a waterfall of course, and inside the vault Nick finds a lot of money and gold. In fact, so much that as he thinks about all the things he can do with that money, both legal and illegal, the screen fades to black, suggesting that Nick is actually a criminal at heart, which makes him even more of a shit police officer and this story even more stupid and kind of racist. The end. Battlefield Hardline didn't have very big shoes to fill after the pretty entertaining yet equally ridiculous campaigns of its predecessors, Battlefield 3 and 4. But in early 2015, other AAA first-person shooter titles like Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, Far Cry 4 and Wolfenstein The New Order would have still given it some fierce competition, not just by storytelling, but by cultural influence as well. The end result is somewhere in the middle. Let's start with the positives. Battlefield Hardline's new and unique setting made it the perfect opportunity to succeed every expectation. A fun yet engaging story of a new officer in the Miami Police Department who gets in way over his head, all presented in a television cop drama sort of style. The amount of clichés in this story can somewhat be excused by the fact the developers went this way, because the bigger part of shows in this genre are also filled with escalating drug busts and countless double crosses. In that way, you can at least see that the developers were seriously invested in giving the player an entertaining campaign with a lot of winks to the source material. What definitely makes the story fun to play through is the huge variety in locations and set pieces. The busy streets of downtown Miami, the sketchy illegal businesses in the Everglades, and the jet-set life of Los Angeles Mount Olympus all make it feel like this game isn't just set in one city, but actually follows a growing illegal enterprise. The beautiful graphics of the Frostbite 2 engine we came to know and love in Battlefield 4 make their return and definitely help to sell the story and the setting, but I do have to be brutally honest that Battlefield 4 looks a lot better. I really don't know what went wrong, but in many instances this game looks like it came out before BF3 and 4, and that mostly comes down to the textures. Luckily, the trademark sound design of the Battlefield franchise is still here in all its glory. Gameplay-wise, this game also sets itself apart from previous entries. Almost every level has an open-ended feeling to it. You can go in guns blazing, you can sneak your way around the level, and with the addition of the arresting mechanic, you can even choose to finish a level without killing anyone. That is apart from the mandatory killings, of course. You can choose your own loadout, including both weapons and attachments, your own gadgets, which sometimes give you new entry points for even more creative freedom. And with the addition of the scanner, you have the opportunity to scope out the area before entering and investigate the levels on top of just completing them. Doing so will give you access to additional information about the story, but also other weapons you can then use in future levels. Long story short, your own preparations, your own approach, your own playstyle. It gives you a sense of freedom in an otherwise linear game. But as my sarcastic tone in the retelling of the story probably already made clear, this doesn't make it a good campaign by any means. With a setting like Cops vs. Robbers, there was a lot of opportunity to create a genuinely interesting story about life as a police officer among increasingly criminal streets and corruption within the bureau. If you take the approach of making it look like a television series, just take inspiration from series like 24 or True Detective, instead of, in my opinion, beating a dead horse and going for the more big dumb action action movie or primetime television approach. This cliché-filled story just doesn't grip me, and most of that can be attributed by the boring personalities of the main characters, the bland conversations they're having, and the okay-ish acting. No one's motive is necessarily explained, nor do you delve into anyone's backstory. Some examples: so many remarks on Nick's mother, but why not show the connection he has with his mother instead of just talking about it? Guy obviously has a huge problem with Leo saying something obscene to her, but why is that? Has she had a bad experience with men? Is it a personal matter between her and Leo? Does she just have a short fuse? Dawes must have had some sort of motive to become dirty, or am I to believe that he's just narcissistic and does it for the money? Sure, some of these things are suggested, but in a campaign that barely reaches the 5-hour mark, they might as well have delved deeper into these characters. Which brings us to the gameplay. Thinking of all the positive things I've said about the open-ended approach to gameplay in this game, I initially didn't find a lot to complain about. That is until you actually start to experiment with all these different approaches. Say you go in guns blazing. That's fine, but with the amount of sixth sense your enemies have, as well as all the alarms scattered around, it's not really encouraged. Okay, so in that case you might want to do it stealthy. Except after trying several times, snipers are pretty much useless because the absolutely awful hit registration makes sure you won't kill anyone with one shot. And in this game, if you don't kill someone with one shot, congratulations, everyone is now aware of your location. So if you decide to go for a stealthy approach without using snipers, that is probably the best way to go. This game pretty much encourages you to use its new arresting mechanic, so it makes sense. Except sometimes the enemy hears you from across the level, sometimes they just know all of a sudden. Save points in this game are so inconsistent that even if you killed all but one enemy and he spots and kills you, congratulations, back to the start you go. On top of that, there is no added benefit to staying completely stealthy. There is no Metal Gear Solid or Hitman-like stealth rating after completing a mission, so if you fail stealth, just go guns blazing until everyone is dead. It doesn't matter. Long story short, if you want to complete missions completely stealthy, glitches and poor hit registration often make sure you fail, and even if you succeed, there is no real reason to do so. And that makes the campaign's only redeeming factor still heavily flawed. Therefore, I really wouldn't recommend playing it.
So congratulations, detective. It's all yours.
Oh my God.
Now what are you gonna do with it?
It won't come as a surprise that in a Battlefield game, most of the time and effort was put into the multiplayer. And with a new setting comes a lot of new possibilities, but also a lot of restrictions. As I've said in the introduction of this video, people weren't really that hyped about the game. Despite relatively positive reviews by critics, and most Battlefield related YouTubers having a lot of fun with the game, it never really seemed to get the amounts of hype its predecessors did get. On the long run, interest started to dwindle rather quickly, which of course didn't help either. But before going into why it failed, let's start with all the positives this game has to offer. First and foremost, I have to go back to my Battlefield 4 video very quickly. In that video I explained the CTE, or Community Test Environment. Keep in mind that at the point of the release of Hardline, the BF4 CTE was still being used extendedly, and many of the things that were initially learned from that CTE were also taken into consideration for Battlefield Hardline. But it wouldn't take long for Hardline to get its own CTE. What this meant was that right from the start, the game got a lot of support and was a lot more playable than pretty much any other Battlefield game had ever been at launch. Not to say it was without problems, but I still remember this period as one in which the developers really listened to the community, and the community really felt like they were being taken seriously. Having that said, let's talk yet again about the 3 points I've been using throughout my Battlefield videos in order to see if this game has everything I expect from a Battlefield game. All-out warfare, team play, and fun. Starting of course with the all-out warfare aspect. Whether people liked it or not, the cops versus robbers setting made the game stand out from the crowd. The initial map ship with the game represented both the typical cops versus robbers locations, think of the back streets of LA, a bank robbery, a swampy area, etc., as well as some more generic locations. Here you can also see that a lot of cues were taken from Battlefield 4. Variety in map size, some focusing more on large-scale conflict, some more on infantry combat. Destructible environments made a return in a similar way to how BF4 handled this. And even Levolution, the ability to trigger a huge destructive event, makes a return even though it's not nearly as much of a presence in this game. Though I would be lying if I said that these maps were memorable, they at least play well and are distinguishable enough to be completely forgotten. For many Battlefield fans, I think the gameplay is where this game changes the most out of any of them. The setting made sure that there would of course be lots of new game modes. Luckily, in my opinion, these are for the most part a lot of fun. Blood Money sees you grab as much money as possible, which you then have to take through your own safe while being hunted by the enemy team. Hotwire is a game mode in which a bunch of vehicles are scattered around the map, and both teams have to capture these vehicles as well as drive them as fast as possible. Heist is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. I don't think I have to elaborate on that. These are by far the most enjoyable game modes as well as the most fitting for the setting. Then of course you also have your Conquest and Team Deathmatch as well as Capture the Bag, but they don't really need an explanation, it's just nice to have those game modes as well. Even though there's not nearly as much game modes in this game compared to BF4 for instance, it's still a fair amount of variety. It wouldn't be a Battlefield game without vehicles, and the vehicles that are in the game make this game yet again stand out from the crowd. Fast muscle cars you can use as a getaway vehicle, SWAT vehicles to infiltrate enemy holdouts, helicopters, motorbikes, boats, you name it. Especially the cars in this game handle significantly different from previous Battlefield games. Because of game modes like Hotwire, the developers wanted to make sure that the cars handle as smoothly as possible, and in my opinion, car handling improved a lot in this game over BF3 and 4. Because of the bigger focus on infantry in this game, the damage model for vehicles was changed as well, making it possible to also damage vehicles with small arms fire. And speaking of small arms fire, as far as the weapons go, I think they did a pretty great job. With the amount of variety and the sorts of guns unique to this game, it yet again made use of its unique setting in the best way possible. This game is not limiting itself to modern day weapons, since it's very likely for criminals to use other weapons than the high-grade military weaponry we've seen in previous games. Sure, you still have your M16s and shotguns, but there's also guns from the Second World War, more affordable weapons you'd find on the streets, and some improvised weapons like a nail gun, a harpoon gun, and a literal improvised gun. All guns are yet again spread out to be used within classes. The classes we've come to expect in Battlefield games aren't here in their normal form, but you can still choose from 4 classes: Operator, Mechanic, Enforcer, and Professional. Each one has distinct weapons and gadgets exclusive to that class, which of course means it just works the same as always. Operators function as the assault class, which means they have the assault rifles and carbines, as well as gadgets like the first aid pack and defibrillators. Mechanics are the engineers, so they get the PDWs and SMGs, and gadgets like explosives and the repair tool. Enforcer is your support class, but instead of LMGs, this class has shotguns and battle rifles. Gadgets stay roughly the same with the addition of the ammo box and explosives, but with a new addition of the ballistic shield. Professional is the scout class, so that means snipers, both bolt action and semi-automatic, and gadgets like a trip mine, a camera and a decoy. Some weapons and gadgets are shared across the classes. For the gadgets it's pretty straightforward with the addition of a taser, grapple hook and zipline. But the weapons are kind of a weird mess. Some weapons are just shared across the board, like the sidearms, melee weapons and the special weapons. But then some other weapons are just randomly mixed in between classes. Some examples: carbines are operator only weapons, but you can use the M1 in every class. Enforcers can choose to use 3 randomly picked bolt action rifles. Professionals can choose to use just 1 shotgun. You get the idea, there's just no consistency in the weapon choice. In order to create some clarity in these messy loadouts, the game offers a unique feature that can be very easily overlooked. Both because it was released a year after launch, at a time in which the player base was already dwindling, and because the feature is kind of hidden away on the loadout page on your Battle.net. The feature I'm talking about is the gun range and gun bench. This extra location lets you customize your loadouts and test out weapons, so you can tweak some of your guns and gadgets before using them in the multiplayer. It also features the most in-depth weapon and character customization of any Battlefield game ever. Here you can choose the camo for your guns and characters, change colors, and even make the weapons look more worn. An absolutely great feature which would have been awesome to see return in the franchise, but unfortunately never did. Combining all of these things and you have a very interesting game with a lot of player choice and customizability. In many ways it sounds exactly like a game the fans would have wanted. So why does this game always get so much hate? First and foremost, it's not about the things that are in the game, it's about the things that aren't. With Battlefield 4, we've seen the absolute full potential of what a Battlefield game could be. A full-scale military shooter with guns, vehicles, and lots of varied maps with destructibility. In its core, Hardline has this as well, but on a much smaller scale. Sure, there are vehicles, but no tanks, no jet fighters, no light armored vehicles, no quad bikes, no hovercrafts, etc. Sure, there are a lot of weapons, but the gunplay had been made more accessible by making recoil a lot easier to control. Not only did it turn every weapon into a pinpoint accurate laser, but it made the game as a whole feel more arcadey instead of semi-realistic. Many die-hard fans even considered it to play more like a Call of Duty game than a Battlefield game. Sure, there are a lot of maps, but not as many as in Battlefield 3 or 4. Not a single one turned into a fan favorite, because, I'll say it again, they really aren't that memorable. And in addition, I haven't even talked about the DLC maps in that regard, because you can't really even play them anymore. But I'll talk about that part later. With all that in mind, I can wholeheartedly say that Battlefield Hardline's multiplayer isn't by any means bad, but as far as all-out warfare goes, it's definitely the most underwhelming game in the franchise. Luckily, team play is still a big part of this game, and in many ways it's similar to previous games. You can play together in a squad, team play is encouraged by giving you extra points for everything you do as a team. Most vehicles are transport vehicles, meaning there's always room for more than one person. Long story short, I don't have to say much more than, yes, team play is here, and it still works as good as any Battlefield game that came before. It's nice to see that the newly introduced game modes definitely were focusing on team play as well. Blood money is more doable when you have a team to cover you while you're stealing the money. Hotwire is a lot easier when you have someone in your passenger seat that can shoot enemies, and you can go on like that. Which brings me to the final and perhaps most important aspect of the game. Is it any fun? It cannot be denied that Battlefield Hardline is one of the most divisive games in the franchise. While I really want to commend the developers at Visceral Games for making an incredibly unique game, some of the staples of the franchise have been left out, which makes it understandable that many people were disappointed. But if you look at this game without focusing on the things that aren't in there, and instead looking at the things that are there is still so much fun to be had. From completely chaotic vehicle chases in Hotwire to intense team play during a heist, it still can give you that same sort of enjoyment that any other Battlefield game can give you. And with the addition of yet another huge Easter egg hunt, which would eventually lead to the Syndicate gun, the game looked like it had a healthy future in store. Looking back at this time, yes, it does feel more like a spin-off game than a main series title, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game by any means. I'd like to take this moment to say without any doubt, yes, the game is a lot of fun. However, as of 2022, unfortunately, the game really isn't played that much anymore. The one server on PC that is still active rarely sees 40+ players online at the same time, and because this is a vanilla server, it doesn't include any of the DLC maps, which is why I didn't really talk about the DLC in this review, as well as that I simply couldn't play it as it was intended. I got lucky once when I was able to find a server which did feature the DLC maps and game modes, but only just that one time. As fun as this game could have been if it was still alive, there is no fun in not being able to play a game. Therefore, I can't recommend buying this game in 2022. The campaign on its own cannot justify the price tag it still has, and even if you manage to get the game for free, in the near future the game will lose its already incredibly small player base. Although it really didn't deserve the huge amounts of hate it got, the game was a fun little distraction on the side while we waited for a game that would blow us away like so many Battlefield titles did before. And boy, were we blown away just 1 year later. Thanks for watching. As always, I really hoped you enjoyed this video, and if you did, consider liking it or subscribing to my channel. Let me know in the comments if you agree with me or if you have other experiences about Battlefield Hardline. I also really like to thank the 350 people who already subscribe to my channel. I really do appreciate it. And of course I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!